This is a video recorded on the date and site shown and records what we saw on the dive. It's strung together from a series of very short clips shot during about an hour in the water at about 20 metres below sea level. This is what we dropped onto. First sight you think, oh, lots of sediment. This is going to be interesting, and in fact it was interesting. If you look a little bit closer, as we're doing now, you'll see a lot of these long, narrow dunes of sediment that were present throughout the dive are composed of dead merl. A lot of it's iron stained, so it's subfossil or fossil merl, but there are white thalli in there which are recently dead, and quite a lot of pink thalli which are still alive. In the troughs we saw lots of smaller lumps of bedrock. The bedrock was a shaly material which fractured into very thin slabs and pebbles. These were fairly light in weight. And the dead merl throughout the dive, most of the dive was on this sort of material, was mixed in. If you dug into the dunes, as is happening just off camera here, you found lots of live merl, about 10% of the total, which is quite considerable. Here you can see another area of reef coming up. Reef throughout the dive was visible in the troughs and also formed smaller raised areas, and was about 15 to 20% of the total area surveyed. And the reef tops were, as you see here, with algae. A lot of it was annual and ephemeral, and there were sponges and other species, but relatively poor in terms of biota. Here we're moving over a trough. You see more live merl. Live merl was often seen at the base of dunes, and this is a still of live merl with red algae, and this is a still at the top of a dune showing live merl, dead merl and shell fragments, pieces of shell, and also small fragments of shale. Moving over a dune and another trough, you can see more live merl, quite large thalli. A lot of it was reproducing with whitish spots visible on it, and a lot of the thalli were fairly large and they were live all over, suggesting that they're moved fairly frequently. This is another trough, and the still here basically allows us to summarise what we're seeing, which is basically these dunes of dead live shell fragments and shell fragments mixed together, which move very frequently over a substratum composed of bedrock with an area of less frequently moved, or a layer of less frequently moved shaly material. In the troughs we had coralline crusts, worm tubes on the material, and also brown algae and Chaetopterus tubes were actually visible, sticking right the way through the large dunes, and we see the top of one here. And this is after a wafting, and this was proved to go all the way through the full depth of a dune down to the bedrock beneath. There were lots of those, and they were the largest ones I've ever seen, approximately 4 to 5 inches tall, some of them. Here we can see another dune with live merl at the base, pink coralline crust visible on some of the bedrock and pebble clasts, and another trough here. And this is a drop test. Live merl is heavier than dead merl, and at the bottom of this drop test here you can just about see now a large live merl thalli dropping down below the lighter dead merl, and last of all is shell fragments, which, being very flat, are lighter than the dead merl. This explains why the live merl tends to separate out, although it can be found, as I said before, mixed in amongst the dead merl and small shale fragments in the dunes. This is an overview of the area, and we can see troughs and dunes. Not very much in the way of sessile life. Marthasterius was the most common species, but there were scallops. This is a little bit of dead bedrock, nice and flat, with larger components exposed. More dunes, and those coralline crusts on the larger pieces of bedrock in amongst the pieces of protruding bedrock in the troughs. They diver for scale with the dunes, and we'll end at the moment on another patch of raised reef.